All right, everyone. Welcome to our fourth session of our Cultivating Best Human Resource Practices put on by the National Farmers Union of Ontario. This is session four, Planning, Task Management, and Delegation. And as always, we've got a real treat for you tonight. We've got three superb panelists that are going to share all kinds of tricks on how to make sure you've got a smooth running operation with staff in whatever agricultural pursuit you are engaged in. I want to say from the onset that this this entire series would not be possible without funding from Employment Ontario, which is funding in part through the Government of Canada and the Government of Ontario. And as I've shared in the last few sessions too, there is a bundle of resources that we have for each of these sessions. In order to access them, we're asking folks to fill out a very, very short survey that is a requirement from our funder. And we are hopeful that we will be receiving funding again from them to be able to continue to operate this HR offerings, as well as the new farmer training program that Ignatius offers. So this is like a joint project between the National Farmers Union Ontario, Ignatius Jesuit Center, and the Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario. So it's a great project that we work on, and we're thankful that you're participating tonight, and we hope that we will be able to continue to offer these. Now, this is the last session of the HR series, but we will have a special one next week that I'll talk, or 2 weeks from now, that I'll talk about at the end of our session. But for now, I'm going to pass it over to Laura, who's going to introduce our speakers for this evening.
Thanks, Dave. So I was doing a little bit of math before we started tonight, and our three panelists have a combined 44 years of experience in farming. So needless to say, I'm very excited to have them here and to be the one to introduce them to all of you. Joining us tonight is Claire Perttula, who started farming in 2017. She loves growing potatoes and raising grass-fed beef. Right now, Claire is the Food Justice Projects Coordinator at Malvern Family Resource Center in Scarborough, Ontario, where she manages Malvern Urban Farm and its farmers market. She works with 40 plus community members and a staff team of 3 to 6, depending on the time of year, to cultivate 2 acres of public land with lots of diverse vegetables and a new 1,200 cell hydroponic microfarm. Claire is also a PhD student at York University studying food systems planning and policy and the succession crisis. Also joining us is Ian Stutt. Ian is the co-owner of Patchwork Gardens, a certified organic vegetable farm in Battersea, Ontario. The farm operation began in 2004 and now produces mixed vegetables in rotation with cover crops on about 25 acres, including greenhouses and cold storage for year-round production. There are 8 to 10 people involved from April through November and 4 to 5 through the winter months. Ian's main area of focus includes soil and crop health, infrastructure and equipment, and financial management and human resources. And last but not least, we have Carl Leslie. Carl has been farming vegetables for over 15 years. He is currently the farm operations manager at Earth to Table the Farm outside of Hamilton. And that's where he hires, trains, supervises, and works alongside a crew of 5. He has also operated his own half-acre vegetable farm business, coordinated an urban community farm, worked on a 6-acre farm in California, done some consulting work, and once upon a time managed a 10-acre teaching farm with up to 15 staff, interns, working shares, volunteers, alternative education, and co-op students. All of this has led to a deep appreciation of the importance of excellent planning, task management, and delegation. So thank you so much to our speakers for being here today to share what they've learned over the years and to help us all aim for better HR practices. You can drop your questions during the presentation into the chat and we will address them as they come up. Otherwise, you can save them to the end and we'll have some Q&A time. And with that, I'll pass it over to Claire to get us started.
All right. Thanks, Laura. Hey, everyone. Um, so yeah, tonight we're going to talk about planning our labor. Um, so a farm plan kind of guides all the decisions you make for your farm. Um, at Malvern Urban Farm, our, I guess, key values and goals are to increase the availability of fresh and culturally appropriate food in the community, and also to engage community in agriculture, and then to engage other community members who can grow food for sale at the farm too. So we kind of set out we know that all of our plans for the season are going to involve one of those three goals, or probably all three of them. We also know that what tasks are like most needed, or just the types of tasks we're doing are going to change over the course of the season. And working for a nonprofit, I have a kind of an idea of when different staff contracts are available. Like Canada Summer Jobs is something that we get most years, and that comes in July and August, or we'd have those positions in July and August. So yeah, those kind of all of those decisions, all of those elements kind of come into play for decisions. Um, the labor plan is, I think, something that's always evolving. Um, and it's really helpful for keeping on track, and kind of having a general sense of what it is that you need to get done and when, knowing that that might change because of the weather or someone being sick or, unexpected things that come up. Um, but it really helps to have a plan for when you think you're going to need people, how many people you need, what tasks they're going to be doing, and when, at the beginning of the season, so that you can kind of go from there and break down into weekly or monthly or day-to-day priorities. Carl, Ian, do you want to add anything there? Okay, next slide, please. All right. So yeah, a successful season requires planning. Um, I like to use I have a big whiteboard, and all of my thoughts go onto this big whiteboard. Um, because I like it because I can erase it and move stuff around a bunch and kind of reclassify things or change what I want to prioritize. Um, and then from that whiteboard, it goes into my calendar. Um, some things I know at the beginning of the season are going to always be constant. Like Lara mentioned, we have a farmer's market that's on Wednesdays. Um, so I know I'm going to be busy on Wednesdays, and I don't try and plan any other activities on those days. And then to keep our harvests as fresh as possible, I plan harvest days for Tuesdays and try and put those in the morning because we know it's cooler in the morning, get stuff out of the field before it's too wilty. Um, and then I just block those into the calendar at the beginning of the season so nobody else can try and take any of those time slots from me. Um, I also know that, April is going to be really heavy for transplanting or for bed prep. So I just try and block out big sections of that. And I try and do all of that first so that when staff, existing or new staff, come in, I can kind of give them that lay of the land so they have an idea of what the whole season is going to look like before we dive into the little bit more detailed weekly and daily plans. Sometimes, depending on the staff that I have, um, we can break down different staff into different roles. I know when I worked on a mixed vegetable farm, I was the lettuce lady. So I knew that on harvest days, I went and did lettuces first. That was my thing. Other people had other stuff to do, and then you could kind of fit in where you needed. Um, Sometimes that doesn't always work. Sometimes people have to pitch in all together anyway. But um, that can be one strategy to kind of helping with the plans, because then everyone knows to keep track of one task instead of the like 15 or however many that might be on your list. Um, Carl or Ian? Yeah.
I could I love the tip on the slide. Um, that was something that I struggled with when I first started working with other folks, was to understand my role is to keep other people working. And the more staff you have, the more your role becomes keeping other people working and less doing something yourself. And I think if you're new to having staff, that's like a mental shift that needs to happen, because it's really easy to be like, I know what I'm doing. I love this job. I'm just going to go do it, and then you lose sight of, okay, that's over and we're nowhere near ready for the next task. And then people are standing around waiting for the next thing. So when I kind of made the shift to understanding my role was to keep other people working, then the farms load a lot better. And obviously that varies depending on the size of operation you have, the number of staff. But yeah.
Cool. And not everyone, I think, just to add to what Carl's saying, um, you can't expect people to kind of know what's next or what they should be doing if you don't communicate that. And even if you do communicate it, it's good to still keep track of what folks are up to and be able to offer, like, say that this is the next thing. Oh, you're done that. Go do the carrots next. Um, it's better to just communicate that, check in, like, hey, what are you going to do next? If people seem like they have an idea, than to assume people know what they should be doing next, and then um, either have everyone standing around or people kind of being lost and, like Carl said, not getting the pressing things done. Um, Next slide, please.
Oh, me. Talking kind of some examples, I guess, of what we're talking about. It's difficult to see a bit, but on the left-hand side is my tasks and timeline sheet. So this is the document that allows the farm to operate in my situation. Everybody has their own way of kind of running and planning things, but this is one that I've been working with for a number of years now, and it's essentially a document that lives on my computer that is anywhere between 4 and 6 pages long, and it basically includes everything that I don't want to forget that we need to do. And it's basically regularly updated and reprioritized, um, as we move through the day and the weeks and the months. I have things down there, just like right now, my task list says things I need to make sure I do in the spring, and things that are like get done before March, and I break it all down, rather than assuming I'm going to be able to remember it all in my head, and then I just review this document. So this is page one that I basically print out at the beginning of each week, which lays out the general priorities for the week. And it lives on my clipboard, and I walk around with it pretty much all the time. And if I see something that needs to be done, it goes onto the clipboard. Even if it's something that doesn't need to be done for like 2 or 3 weeks, it's basically like a mental note. And then all those notes basically then go back into the bigger document later and get reprioritized so that things aren't forgotten, essentially. And that's basically how I personally track my own priorities and the priorities of the farm operation. And so we have, people's schedules in there. We've got the weekly tasks. We've got priorities. Then I have my own individual tasks kind of listed there. And then you can see I cross stuff off when it's done and I add stuff in as I think of it. And then the right-hand side is just an example of like a transplanting chart that I use. So this be printed out each week for what's being transplanted that week. And it's basically something that can be taken out into the field and you record what actually happens and don't lose information that way. And if someone tells you about how the transplanting went, this is a perfect place to like make a note about it. Like the cucumber seedlings were weak or whatever, you know. Just my couple examples of how I kind of track tasks and plan ahead. Yeah, I'm every farmer will have their own kind of systems, but this is actually, especially the tasks and timelines thing. I got into doing it when I was managing that larger operation. And even when I was running my own farm, I tried to not have one because I was tired of like managing a task list. So I tried to like operate my own farm business, solo farm business without one. And I just wasn't able to do it, you know. I just couldn't keep track of like what I needed to do and make sure I was doing the most important thing. So I think it's a helpful thing regardless of your scale. Yeah. I don't know if Ian and Claire have anything you want to add about those.
That sounds very familiar, Carl. And I think you're right. Just having a number of options. You see, like you've got the clipboard going, and a tablet. I end up just with 4 or 5 pieces of paper stuffed in my pocket, and that I'm always updating, and so I think whatever tends to work for you, and keep an eye on that, because you notice something that needs doing, but it's going to be an hour or a day or longer than that before you get to it. So keeping track of those things is super handy one way or the other. Okay, this looks like next slide here. And so communicating these plans, these work plans with staff, with one another. Another example where you probably have as many different approaches as you do farms. In this case, what's the best way to get that out of your head and get that communicated? A number of options there, and these just happen to be 2 perfect examples. A dry erase board like that and a chalkboard. To me, I think, Claire, you were talking earlier just about that shift when you do have staff and wanting to kind of stay ahead, have that plan ahead, so there's efficiency from task to task throughout the day, and you don't bring a load of a crop in, get it all processed, and then all of a sudden, okay, what's next? So there is that shift, and at first I remember that being a tricky one for me, because we just kind of did everything as a group, but then you'd run into that, and so that role of trying to forecast where you're going started having me a bit more removed from the group at times, because I'd be on to the next thing, trying to make sure we're ready to move on. We understand what tools are needed, timing, conditions, whatever it is. And so there was a bit of that trick, trying to stay connected with the group, because it's kind of a social thing. But anyways, it takes time to learn that, I think. Getting good at that and being on your toes, but finding ways to do it that you still feel kind of connected to the group through the day. These tools here, the chalkboards, are tried and true, and really give that chance to get it out of your head, get it out on display. Your staff can kind of read it at a glance. They can add to it. It's that kind of living list there where you can quickly keep track of these things. And we like to encourage, leave the chalk there, and everybody, if you see something, throw it up there and have that be very much a team effort as you go. So that, I think, captures that slide. If we move to the next one. And weigh in if you had any extra comments there. But team engagement, so much of this, we started working with staff, I think it was 13, 14 years ago, and the farm's completely built on having a team. Our farm's Patchwork Gardens, so we call ourselves the Patchworkers, and kind of have that team mentality where you're part of that, and engaging, empowering, having that sense of belonging is kind of at the heart of it all, because you're building that work environment, you're building that set of practices, and as much as you can, you all perhaps know the feeling when things are going well and you're on the same page. It just feels good to be part of that. So that engagement is a big deal, and setting expectations, perhaps if we focus, say it's a first year hiring staff, it's a big step, and that communication, that respect, and that positive environment are all kind of crucial pieces of the puzzle. But as you get into it, those clear plans and setting those expectations allows everybody to understand where they are, where they're going. Of course, lots of questions and working that out together, but that teamwork is kind of is critical, and you are kind of setting the stage for that. As a role on top of washing vegetables or doing deliveries, a key role there. And that kind of follows, if you look down the slide here, listening, retention. These are things that just fit right into that approach of really trying to have that team mentality. I think these bottom ones here, at the end of a season, a review is huge, and it allows you to, a little humility. Please give us feedback. What can we learn from you? What could you see working better? I think that's really important, to be open to that. And then the same thing, returning employees, for example, to following season, engage them. How can you see things flowing better, working better? What things did we kind of get caught up on or miss? So all very valuable tips there. Carl and Claire, anything to add to that?
Yeah. I think in terms of checking in regularly with staff, I feel like I always set out with the best intentions of having a set time in the week when, like, either Monday morning or Friday afternoon, or like sometime, always try to kind of have a regular check-in. Um, and usually we go like a week, well, maybe like a couple weeks, and then something comes up like a long weekend, or we've got some event, I don't know. And then we forget about it for a little bit. And then it's like 2 weeks later and we realize we haven't all sat down and kind of regrouped on all the stuff that's going on, and it starts to feel a little hectic. Um, so all that to say, even if it doesn't happen all the time, I think setting those schedules, like setting the intention of saying, like, we are going to do these group check-ins. Um, Even if you forget, you'll remember eventually. And it can be tough to kind of remember to do that, and make time for stuff if you're having like casual conversations while you're harvesting or you think you've caught everyone up, or it's all written on the whiteboard. It can still be good to set that time aside to actually like all sit down or stand around and talk about it all together. Um, and just to the season review point, as much as I want to do check-ins in the season, sometimes it's hard to pivot when stuff is happening, or it's hard to like reflect in the middle of all the chaos and the busyness. Um, so it is nice to take a separate moment at the end to just kind of think about how everything went.
So I think, yeah, on to the next slide there, eh?
Yeah, so this is a couple examples of things that I work with. The learning objectives, the document on the left, that's what I used last spring, basically for each new staff who's joining, to kind of basically for me to get a sense of what they're hoping to get out of the year. And I'm pretty sure I plagiarized this from some other farm. I've done a lot of plagiarizing of documents from other farms, stealing stuff I like. So this, I think, is a good example of something I stole and modified. But it is a helpful thing to do at the beginning of the year. And then the document on the right is the farmer performance review document. So this again is more set up for year one, first time on a farm type situation staff. So again, this was stolen from another farm, pretty sure. And again, it basically is something where I would, at the beginning of the year, everybody fills out the learning objectives, and then we have our performance review, and we do two. Last year, I did three. I think every 2 months, I did a kind of sit down formal check in with everybody. That included a review of their learning objectives, where things are at, and then also their performance. It's basically like a conversation starter. Is a large way that these documents functioned. I'll share another one a little bit later. That's the manager performance review, so where the staff are kind of speaking about my performance and how they feel like the farm is operating. Yeah, I don't know. I find these helpful and good conversation starters. Yeah.
All right, this one's me. Um, so in figuring out all your labor, um, it can be really helpful to first kind of figure out the team dynamics that you have. Sometimes people working together like know each other already or are friends, or sometimes they don't. Um, kind of evaluating the different levels of experience that everybody has and kind of figuring out how that's gonna make a difference for your team. Um, oh, great. The share the vision piece talks about the meetings that I was talking about before. Um, it's good to something I've been really trying to do and something that I'm hoping to get better at this year is making sure that everybody knows how all the different little tasks fit into our bigger goals. I don't want anyone to feel like they're stuck doing like busy work or stuck doing like the worst job that they hate doing for no reason. Um, but it's really important to explain that like, yes, I know watering the seedlings is kind of boring, but you really do have to do it first thing, and you really do have to pay attention because that how well we water the seedlings impacts how many we get to transplant, which impacts how many we get to harvest later. Like they're all of these things are connected. Um, so I think sharing the vision is something that I'm gonna really try to come back to a lot this year. Um, in terms of respecting people, valuing your team and respecting people, um, something I always say at the beginning of the season particularly when I have new people, and bring them, or like we're all out in the field for the first time, is to like listen to your own body and take breaks when you need to. Don't wait for my don't wait for my cue. Don't wait for me to take a break. You are allowed to do that and like deal with, like, your own body. You know if you need to take some water, if you need to stretch or something. And I've some feedback I've gotten from staff is that like hearing that right at the beginning makes them feel a little bit more comfortable, and um, just like helps them be a little bit more aware of the tasks that they're doing and how they're feeling. Um, and they know that like no one's going to judge them for like being the first one to take a break or not lifting as heavy a thing or something like that. Like that there is just kind of that level of respect there for everyone's limitations, the things that people are best at, all that kind of stuff. Um, Something my team just said today was that we should get walkie-talkies. We mostly just call each other because we don't have walkie-talkies. We have like shared calendars in our work emails, um, and like notes and stuff. We have a lot of whiteboards and things, places. So we try to share information in those ways, but um, in the field, we mostly use phones and just call each other. But I think a walkie-talkie would be really fun. Um, and then last one on this slide, team dynamics. Um, Sometimes working alone is really boring and kind of lonely, but also sometimes sometimes it's just necessary. Sometimes you have too many people doing one thing and it crowds everything up. So pay attention to how many people you really need for each staff or each task. Why Carl asked in the chat, why would walkie-talkies be better than phones? Sometimes I think it's just easier if you're muddy and you're trying to like unlock your phone with your muddy hands and then call somebody and like you drop it in the, I don't know. It's really because of the mud. Walkie-talkies are cheaper and it's just one button to push, so there's less that can go wrong, I guess. Um, the phones work just fine, but uh and Rochelle added they're more focused and everyone's on the same channel potentially. For sure, yeah. If I'm taking out my walkie-talkie to say like, hey, we're moving on to this thing, I'm less likely to like see a text from somebody else that I want to answer or again drop it in the mud. Yeah. Anything else to add, you two? All right. Next slide, please.
I'm muted. I'm just convinced I need to get walkie-talkies. Um, I used a lot of walkie-talkies for so many years, and I was like over it. But I guess I need to get back into it. So yeah, this is another document that I mentioned earlier, the manager performance review. So again, this is filled out by the other staff during like 3 times a year, essentially. And it, again, is more it's about the manager, but also how they feel like the team dynamics are, how they feel like I can't actually read all the examples there, but like getting a sense of what people are feeling good about, what people are not feeling good about, and trying to come up with ways to solve those pain points or whatever. And again, like having a structured time to ask these questions, I find helpful. People, in my experience, like they appreciate having like a formal sit down rather than trying to like grab you when you're in the middle of doing something. They feel like they're intruding on your other more important tasks. But if you set aside time, then I find, are more willing to kind of speak openly. At least that's my experience. Yeah, and I think it's again important to be very self-reflective as a manager and understand the dynamics of your role, especially if you're new in the management position, and trying to feel out in what way you're a coworker and in what way you're a manager. And that's figuring out how that works for the benefit of the farm is a major, ongoing attempt to solve, right? So yeah, I don't know if Ian or Claire have anything to say about that piece.
Can I quickly ask you, Claire and Ian, do you do anything similar where you try to get individual or group feedback on your performance as management? It might not be as like specific or detailed a form like that, but do you have strategies or techniques where you're trying to get feedback like that?
We do in a less formal way. We've lucked out the last number of years with returning staff, so those relationships are built over the years, and in a way that's feedback in itself when you can get people returning. But yes, absolutely. I think there are moments. And you know how it is. There's focus on tasks and whatever it may be, but there's also all this interpersonal, moments that go well, that don't go well, and so yeah, I think it's that in a number of informal moments through the season where just acknowledging your role and taking the time to talk and connect and check in. But if we're talking feedback for ourselves, there, be open to that and encourage that. How do you see this going? Any of those moments are chances to engage and encourage that input. So I think those early and late, formal moments of a season review and that kind of thing are really great, because it's even something to look forward to. Sometimes staff can kind of bank a few things and say, well, I know come November, whatever it is, we'll be having a chat. And so I'll just make note and keep track of things. But yeah, throughout as you go, day to day, week to week as well.
I don't have anything formal, like the sheet that you had, Carl. So I'm gonna check it out in the resources thing after. Yeah, it's nice having returning staff. Clearly something's going well, but I think it's always good to find new opportunities and other ways to like gather that feedback about how you as the manager are managing the workflow and all those interpersonal things, and the work environment in general. Okay, encouraging productivity and efficiency. Um, this comes down, I think, again, in part to knowing your staff, um, knowing what people like doing and don't like doing. Like I personally hate weeding. I'm not very fast. I get very overwhelmed. Or like if I do it, I'm really slow. But some people really, really love doing it and find it really meditative, or really like it's something they really excel at, and aren't quite as keen to shovel or dig, dig row cover in or something. So um, it's important to kind of recognize that. Sometimes everyone's going to have to pitch in and dig or weed, but if we're in a kind of a regular situation where that's not the case, um, I like to let people do the things that they like doing. Um, I think setting targets is really good, and I should probably set more of them. Usually we just have an overall time target of like, I want to get all of this harvested in 3 hours. I haven't ever tried breaking it down by like 20 bunches in 10 minutes, but I think that is something I'll try this year. Um, and I really like the tip here on the slide that do what you can to make tasks enjoyable, but remember you're not a camp counselor. Staff need to be internally motivated. Um, I sometimes you just have to do stuff that you don't really want to do or that isn't that exciting, but it's really important to the success of the farm. Um, and we can play music, we can like talk about, the TV shows that are on or whatever we want to talk about. Um, but we also do need to get stuff going. We do need to get stuff done. Um, and yeah, you just got to get stuff done. So I think this comes back to kind of understanding where everything fits into the broader goals. I think it's easier to power through those tasks that you don't love when you understand that they're part of this bigger thing that maybe you do love, or that is really important, even though that this particular thing doesn't feel critical. Um, yeah, hold on, let me just look at these notes here real quick. Oh, the other thing is with weather. Um, I don't know about for all of you, but last summer was really, really hot. A couple seasons before that was really, really rainy. And those things can make it challenging to get the stuff that needs doing done. So it's important to be able to be a little bit flexible depending on the task. And how long it's raining for or how long the extreme heat advisory lasts. Um, Sometimes again, like we will probably always have to harvest on Tuesdays because we have our market on Wednesdays. There's really no getting around that. Um, but we can maybe be flexible about other things, or we can try and wait out the rain and do something else in the meantime. Um, Dave said in the chat that some folks have provided end of day bonuses if all the carrots are pulled or something like that before an imminent frost. Um, I unfortunately don't have the power to do that, but I think that's a super good option for motivating people. In the heat, um, there's a gas station near us that has really, really good slushies. And they're like $1. So I will often do a slushy run for people if I know that we're all melting. Um, and it's not the same as an end of day bonus for pulling all the carrots, but at least it cools you down a little bit in the middle of the day and helps us get those tasks done. Um, Anything to add?
I have a general question that maybe is for everybody, and it's about the requesting staff to maintain records of their times and variables such as crop conditions, and just how people go about doing that. And because that seems like something I'm currently realizing I need to do more of. Um, and yeah, just wondering what systems people are using for that.
I can actually speak to that a little bit. We did a bit of that at Fertile Ground Farm, and we wouldn't do it for every crop, but just specific crops that we were trying to figure out if they were worth it, like worth the amount of time it was taking. So beans or carrots, like looking at their profitability. And we would have just one person from the start to the end of their task set their phone up to like take the time, and then we would have a Google form for people to input that data at the end of the day. But we didn't do that for everything. We also did it for greenhouse seeding as well to kind of get a better sense of how long certain tasks take and then have a general idea of whether it's worth having a certain number of people on those tasks.
I really like that. I don't do it, but I think that's a good idea.
Carl, I think one of the upcoming slides, there's a little chart touching on that as well, so I could weigh in a little bit there too.
I do ask people to keep track of variables like crop conditions. Not so much for their productivity, but just like to know what's going on. And I think any opportunity to like get particularly new staff to kind of hone their observation skills and really like pay attention to what's going on um, is really um, is really helpful. And I don't have a system, but I like what Lara said about just like a Google form to input those, or like something like that where it'll all be in a spreadsheet at the end of the year. Um, because it's helpful to just know about like, did the wet spot that's usually in that field move? Or like yeah, it's just I think it's helpful to keep track of those crop conditions, but I have never tried to link it to people's harvest times or like activity times.
Well, here this will kind of continue this point a little, looking at mechanization, the right tools for the job. We run a vegetable farm, and so labor intensive, but lots of focus on the right tools and making those decisions. You could see here on the slide, mapping those expenses when you're spending that. Retention, Claire's talking about digging in row cover. Some of those jobs that, yeah, exactly, they're not a lot of fun, especially in the heat. The tasks that no one likes doing. A brief aside, those are the ones where we really try to say, okay, all hands on deck. We got to shovel, we got to cover the edges of row cover. We got to, clearing out the greenhouse, lugging out tomato plants, whatever it is. We really try to make that a team effort and share that grind. But cost of production analysis, making these decisions, if we're looking at specifically the job, the question of choosing the right tools for the job, maybe if we go to the next slide, those are key moments in the farm, in the business, and a few of those tools, they kind of all connect back together here, making these decisions, but also having a good guide on how to make the right decision. I'm trying to see, there's maybe a question here. I lost it. Anyways, perhaps we can get back to that. Or if someone prompts me, just let me know if it's something that could be answered now. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, the question, Ian, is a few questions about crop reporting. When in your day are your staff taking the time to evaluate crops? For example, after harvesting, and do you train people to evaluate, or do you find that some people naturally gravitate to reporting that information?
Yep, great question. I think generally something like that, just fluid. Please feedback. If you see something, talk about it, bring it up. No formality to it, but often, you're familiar. I think Claire was talking at one point being the lettuce lady, and So you get familiar with that crop, you're connected to it, and there's a good moment to, read the signs and talk about it when you see things. So that's just real time. Whenever it comes up, bring it up, absolutely. Looking at these two examples here, just mechanization. I was going to make a joke, like when do you move to the next job or the next tool? With carrots, digging carrots, it's after breaking 12 digging forks. But then I realized everyone's muted. You won't hear any laughter. So anyways, I still tell the joke. But if you look at this, the bottom right of the slide, the yellow lines there, this is one that we used for a number of years. At the end of the day, there'd be a sign out. So your staff would be there, your crops would be across. And at the end, you could see a total column. So that was the hours worked in a given day, but they were broken down by crop. And it takes an extra minute, at the end of the day. But it's very, very valuable to collect that information. And you can do it. It doesn't need to be ongoing, forever. But if you're trying to zero in on a couple specific crops or just generally, what we were doing there is getting the hours in by crop at the same time as you would, say, here, I worked on this day, this many hours, and that goes to your payroll. But just to the left of that, you could see the other little spreadsheet snippet there. One of the most valuable things I think we've ever done is put that effort into to tally our cost of production by crop. And you can see there, just 3 examples: garlic, onions, and beets. And a lot of the stuff like a land cost. So, whether it's rent or fertility inputs or, tillage equipment, a lot of that would be captured in your land cost. Sales cost would be things like, deliveries, time spent at a market, time spent administration of a CSA, that type of stuff would be considered a sales cost. But the hours there, kind of towards the center, that was all the variable that we needed our staff to, and they just do a quick thing. Maybe 4 of them are checking out at the end of the day. How long did we spend in the beets? How long did we spend here? And it doesn't have to be perfectly accurate, that's ballpark numbers, but that's a critical piece. Then it goes in there under hours. So at the end of the year, you could say, well, we spent 300 hours in the garlic. I can't remember how accurate this is, but you could see at the far edge, the profit margin, the percent there, showing that garlic was profitable. It made money for us. Onions in that year, we lost money, and beets were just marginally profitable. So it's just a brief example, and we could talk another time about that cost of production tally. It's, for us, was very important, but combining, a sign out sheet or a Google sheet, Google Doc, or a tablet, however you want to do that, gathering that information played a big role in understanding, what crops were worth doing, what weren't. And so when that brings you to that question of investing in tools. And you could see in the pictures here, there's a carrot harvester and there's a transplanter on the right side, larger investments. But when you have those numbers of your costs, when you could say, well, I'm spending $6,000, $8,000, $12,000 for our team to, manage this crop of carrots, you start to say, okay, I'm already spending however many thousands of dollars. If I took that and invested in, an undercutter, maybe it's a smaller tool, but an undercutter that helps loosen up the soil and you pull the carrots more easily. And in this case, there's a carrot harvester. Those start to become easier decisions to make, because it's not just cross my fingers and make the right call, but instead you could say, there's already money being spent, and how can this fit and really help support a good decision in that case. So as far as that mechanization, there's a lot to it, but these would be maybe a couple of the examples of really tracking your costs, with a fair bit of accuracy. It doesn't have to be precise. You don't want to spend a ton of time doing this, but it helps you really look at your numbers, say in the off season, and make these decisions.
All right. Stuff doesn't always go to plan, and that is okay. Sometimes it feels like a disaster, but it's really important to foster a resilient environment where mistakes don't destabilize the entire system. Um, and when you're going from like just you doing everything to now figuring out like how a group of people or even one new person learns and understands information and best processes information and does stuff, like there's a lot of opportunities for things to kind of go a little bit sideways. It's important to kind of frame those mistakes as opportunities for growth and learning. There are always opportunities to try something different, both on your end as the manager or on their end. Take ownership for your own mistakes, and depersonalize responsibility by using team-based language. So talk about how the system broke down, how the system could be improved to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Not like, how could you just be better at listening to figuring out what's in my brain? And obviously, health and safety mistakes are the ones with the most serious consequences. So someone using a tool or a piece of equipment wrong, or somebody getting injured is obviously always the worst mistake to happen. So we want to try and avoid those. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay. So this is something that I'm still working on for this year, but I'm working on them in response to some mistakes we had with harvesting last year. We had a couple of things harvested into the wrong types of containers. So some of our greens these are for the hydroponics, which is why it talks about like plugs and stuff. But some of our greens were left in an open crate and put in the fridge, so they wilted like almost immediately. Some stuff wasn't put in water, or sometimes with our tomatoes and peppers, we were just doing extra work. Like we were harvesting them into a big crate and then having to put them into our little pint containers, which was taking up time that we could have spent like packing the lettuce properly. So, and I recognized afterwards that I just kind of asked people like, hey, can you go harvest the lettuce and make sure it goes in the fridge? But I wasn't specific enough, and I was rushing, and I didn't have didn't really give people an opportunity to ask questions that they might have had, or anything like that. So, and recognize that I won't always be around to answer questions, and that the rushing might happen again. Sometimes I am going to ask people to just harvest something, and then I'm going to go do something else. So to kind of avoid, hopefully, some of these mistakes from happening again, I've put together, and I'm continuing to put together, harvesting guides that have like what type of container we put things in, how we harvest them, where they go, how we label them, so that if I give instructions that aren't super clear, there's this fallback to go and check the harvesting guidebook, and follow the things that I've laid out there, which are hopefully clear enough to answer any questions that I might have left with my initial instructions. And they're pretty basic. I wouldn't send somebody in to do this harvesting without I wouldn't send someone in to do this harvesting for the first time with only these instructions. I would This is just like later for reference once they've done it a couple of times before. Carl or Ian? No. All right.
Retention. Yes. So, recently I've had good success with retention, which is nice. When I think about retention, I think it begins in the job description when you're first hiring somebody. I try to have something in there to highlight that I'm looking for folks who are interested in more than one season. And then in the hiring process, I kind of ask people what their plans are like after this year. Like, are you going off to India? Like what's going on, as much as they're able. And then I really try and hire folks who are at least open to the possibility of coming back for a second season. Um, and then for the whole season, I kind of keep circling back to it. Like in all my check-ins, there's a section in there about like, if you came back next year, what would you be interested in doing? What responsibilities would you want to take on? What's that kind of thing, and then having open conversations about pay and like all these things, right? So I think it begins like, yeah, with the first time you hire someone, I think it needs to be on your brain if you're open to having people come back. But anyway, I don't know why you wouldn't be. But yeah, I these are all great ideas that may or may not work in your context. Like I love this line about support your farm staff in finding affordable year-round housing in your area, which maybe where you're living there is affordable housing, but maybe where you're living there isn't. So it might be an impossible task from the beginning. But I like the idea. But I think, as much as you can, everything you've done through the whole year is try and cultivate a staff member who is going to be valuable, who you want to have return and who wants to return. And that I think is the biggest sign of success of your whole HR experience. um, yeah, I don't know if I had anything else to say about that. Um, yeah, I'm happy to leave it at that. I don't know if Claire or Ian, you've talked about retention already, but maybe you want to say some more.
Sorry, I'm trying to find the mute button. I think very briefly, your role here is really encompasses these questions. You're a leader, you're a manager, however you want to think of that role, but these all factor in, and it's it can be, if it's something that you're considering, hiring staff and the whole HR package. This is part 4 of this whole thing. It's a role and a responsibility that you can get good at, and how you set these things up can really set the stage for good retention. The farm benefits so much to have people coming back, and not having to relearn and not having all those variables. So the time you can spend, acknowledging your role and how to be good at doing that type of thing. The idea of teamwork, engaging, and it really can pay off to spend time focusing on that kind of, dynamic on the farm. So yeah, and retention's a huge deal.
Yeah, having said all these great things about retention, I also know some farms, especially in the early years, where they're making lots of mistakes, and they really want to change things from one year to the next. They actually like not having returning staff because they maybe have learned things and developed habits that they want to cut out in the next season. It's like if you're really got an operation where you know everything that's going on and you feel really good about it, then retention's a great thing. But it could be that if you really want to make significant changes to your farming operation from one year to the next, that having staff knowing previous ways of running things could actually hinder that change unless they're also on board for making those changes. So that's another piece, and I think also being willing to recognize if someone isn't working out, and if this retention's a great thing if you've got a great worker. Retention's not a great thing if you've got, someone who's not really up to standard, right? And maybe at that point it is time to acknowledge that and move on and try to find someone who you think will have the right a better attitude to work with you on the farm. Yeah, so I guess, retention's a great thing, but there's little, it's not always in all situations a good thing. Yeah.
Can I just add to that? I think Carl, the like check-in and learning documents that you shared earlier, um, are really kind of helpful for making some of those decisions because um, it can be tough to have to let someone go or like say that they won't be returning. It can also be tough to kind of decide when like enough tries is enough tries or like enough chances is enough chances. Um, and so having some documents at the beginning of the season that kind of lay out like we'll do these check-ins, these are your learning goals, or even just like a policy around um kind of like, you know, we'll talk if it's like an issue, we'll talk about this many times. We'll do these kind of series of interventions, and then if that doesn't work, then we've like followed it. Um, which hopefully was covered in a different session because I'm not explaining that super well. But yeah, having some of these different like tracking and check-in mechanisms can kind of help when you're finding that your staff isn't isn't um isn't working out the way you hoped. But retention is great and it makes my life a lot easier when people come back the next year.
Awesome. Thank you guys for sharing all your perspectives and your experience with that. That brings us to the end of our presentation. So if anybody has some burning